Welcome to the Polite Conversations podcast, where every episode is focused on civility, decorum, and good manners. And I'm your lovable, non-controversial host, Ina. If you know me, you know I definitely don't like to ruffle any feathers at all. Hello, dear listeners. Today I'm going to read you an excerpt from a recent Patreon post I did breaking down this absolutely ridiculous IDW War on Science book they have coming out in July of this year. Alleged sex pest Lawrence Krauss tweeted it out a couple of days ago, and the whole cast of characters is like, oh, well, you gotta see it to believe it. Occasionally, people ask me to make audio versions of the posts I write on Patreon, but it's not always completely possible because sometimes you just need to see the visuals, and there are links and things that I add within the posts, so it really is better suited to text. But I'll read you what I can here with some slight tweaks to make it more audio friendly, but after a certain point it becomes very visual and link based, so you kind of have to see it and read it. And boy, is it a wild ride. The kinds of clowns that they've gathered for this project are like straight out of The Onion. I would love to make this post public because I think that the more people who know about how awful and non-credible these characters are, the better. But unfortunately, I too need to get paid for the work I do. I've got bills to pay, a kid to look after, so I can't really do that unless I get some new patrons to sign on and cover the cost of the hours that went into the post. So, dear listeners, if you've been considering becoming a member, now's the time. Because A, you'll unlock this hilarious breakdown of this ridiculous project, and if we get a few of you, then we can make the post public for everyone. We don't need much, just maybe 6 or 7 new monthly patrons above the $1 tier, obviously, because a total of $6 won't really help cover the costs. Or if we're talking annual subscribers, not only do you get a discount if you go for an annual subscription, but then I can unlock with less new subscribers too. So if you enjoy the work and if you have found value in it, please do consider supporting the show because it is harder and harder to function as a small-time leftist podcast where social media has been gutted. The algorithms are constantly suppressing non-right-wing content. The audiences are simply not having it shown in their feeds. And in this climate of constant right-wingery, please support your small-time leftist content creators. All right, let's begin. The war on science is coming from inside the book. As a content creator, I find myself quite stunned with this pace of unraveling of the world as we once knew it. Each topic in the news is more unbelievable than the last, and as someone who covers these things, where do I even begin? Do I discuss the unimaginable horrors inflicted on Palestinians day after day in this live-streamed automated genocide, or do I discuss the erosion of civil rights in the U.S.? Should I focus on the uniquely fascistic AI slop that Trump is using to declare his plans for ethnic cleansing in Gaza, while trying to frame mass expulsion as a humanitarian act? As I write this, he has just issued a direct and open threat of genocide to all Palestinians in Gaza, and the media is downplaying it, lying about it. I mean, fuck. The U.S. was already in the process of assisting with the genocide of Palestinians, no doubt, but the declaration of intent wasn't explicit. Now it is. I mean, words fail me. There's just so much. Should I focus on the unbelievably despicable bullying of Zelensky we witnessed in the White House? The extremely public ganging up on a sitting leader? The mocking of his clothes? I've never seen anything like it. Perhaps I should talk about the cruel and pointless trade wars Trump is constantly threatening to inflict on Canada and Mexico, then withdrawing from. Even without actual tariffs, the unpredictability alone will cause our whole continent to suffer, including America itself. I mean, truly, I feel like we don't even have the vocabulary to describe the state of the world right now. Since Trump and his Nazi shadow president, Elon, took control of the US, every second of every day there are at least 46 things I could try and comment on. The truth is, though, no matter what I start making content about, there's a new horror more outrageous than the last. Before I can even finish unpacking the first thing, I'm sure everyone who covers politics and fascism for a living is experiencing very unusual challenges nowadays and feeling inundated and overwhelmed, but we need to resist the urge to curl up into a ball. We cannot just hope for this to pass. We, the left, the non-right even, really need to organize and take action now. Join some groups, get on the ground, go out and protest, do some boycotts. We need to support minorities and oppose fascists, and we need to be very vocal about it, wherever you are, not just in the US. We need to support leftist content loudly, constantly. You may think I'm saying this because I'm a leftist content creator, but really, a huge part of why the right has gained so much power is not because their ideas are popular, it's because they have the funding to flood social media with right-wing content, and eventually they took social media entirely. We have actually popular ideas on our side. We just need to be less complacent and become more vocal in our advocacy. This tsunami of bullshit by the Trump administration may seem haphazard and chaotic, but it's all by design, of course. They want to flood the zone, disorient, overwhelm us into a stunned silence. And sadly, this strategy seems to be working on Trump's only real opposition with power, the Democrats. They seem utterly incapable of facing what's happening with the energy that's needed. I just saw an article about Democrats unhappy with other Democrats who went beyond traditional protest tactics such as outfit coordination and refusal to clap during Trump's speech to Congress. I mean, wow. If that is already too much opposition for them, then they are just not up for the job. They or their centrist equivalents across the world aren't coming to save us. So we must organize. This is by no means going to stay contained to the US. It is going to spread across the world if left unchecked. It has been spreading at an accelerated pace since at least 2015, 2016, and now Trump 2.0 is just pouring the gasoline to burn it all down. If you missed it, do check out my recent episode for more on the general state of the world and the US these days, and on how we may have ended up here. It's titled Trumpocalypse: Who Enabled the Gamergatification of America? I'll link it in the show notes. Today, though, in the face of all this uncertainty and volatility, I'm going to try and find some serenity in my usual beat, dunking on the IDW and their adjacent ghouls. It's my safe space. I know I can always count on them to be comically stupid at levels beyond parody. It's a constant. There is some peace in that in this wild, wild world of unknowns. Let's leave the unknowns behind for a bit, dear listeners, and journey back into the world of the reliably awful rationales of the IDW sphere. For those who may not know what the IDW is, I'm referring to this group of right-leaning intellectuals and public figures who once dubbed themselves the intellectual dark web. Their latest venture seems to be a collection of essays on what they deem to be threats to free speech, open inquiry, and the scientific process. What's wrong with that, though? The Trump administration is obliterating funding for research in science and medicine, and it's urgent that scientists bring awareness to it. Trump is purging any mention of the climate crisis from U.S. government websites right off the back of the LA wildfires, which he blamed on diversity instead. I also did an episode on that. I'll link it in the show notes too. Trump's attack on federal science agencies has also directly raised the threat of extinction for endangered species. He's implemented a whole slew of actions and executive orders to dismantle any previous efforts to tackle climate change. And he's doing this just after the world experienced its hottest year on record in 2024. He is boosting fossil fuel production, withdrawing from the Paris Accords, proposing the elimination of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that is, which will definitely impact the country's ability to manage and recover from extreme weather events. Trump suggested getting rid of FEMA while visiting people affected by Hurricane Helene, by the way. Just absolutely ridiculous timing. He's also put a notorious anti-vaxxer in a top position as health secretary of all things, and now there's a measles outbreak and an unvaccinated child has died as a result. A child has died of a disease that was declared eliminated in the U.S. in the year 2000 by the World Health Organization. And guess what? On his first day in office in 2025, Trump signed an executive order to withdraw the U.S. from the WHO. These are unbelievably stupid and entirely preventable times. It cannot be said enough. Trump has also been rolling back civil rights, firing people of color, attacking and purging any mention of trans people. He has banned trans women and girls from sports, attempted to freeze funding to places providing gender-affirming care to minors. His attacks on people's freedoms and their very existence are abundant these days. His attacks on science and medicine, on climate change policies are unmatched. And when it comes to freedom of speech, he tweeted, Truth Social, this: all federal funding will stop for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protests. Agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No masks! ! Thank you for your attention to this matter. This has to be one of the most unhinged things I've seen vocalized by a democratically elected leader. Peaceful protests on campus are legal in the U.S. Protected speech even, protected by the First Amendment. Students should not be expelled at the behest of the president either. That is a matter for the school. The attack on masking is itself a serious violation of rights and safety in a time where we are still battling COVID. Clearly, this authoritarian take is inspired by pro-Palestine protesters who were relentless and exceedingly brave last year and are being brutalized by the NYPD as I write this. But let's not forget, they were silenced, arrested, and beaten by the police, even under the Democrats. But they didn't just come out and openly say they wanted to ban protest and imprison or expel students for it. They did these things a little more quietly. I'm honestly not sure what the easier fight is, the open fascism or sneaky, underhanded fascism, but I guess we have to fight the open, brazen kind right now because that's what we're facing in much of the Western world, as the issue of Palestine has shown us. The right is using the silence and complicity of the Dems and their counterparts around the world on this issue, as well as their lack of sufficient vocal support for minority and trans rights to make huge power grabs across the globe. And our centrist politicians do not seem to be interested in appealing to the left. They are too busy pandering to the right. So, because there's no powerful opposition and the right is in attack mode, there's a lot of silencing happening out in the open now, and an unprecedented war on science. In fact, this book seems, from its title, The War on Science, it seems entirely appropriate, timely, and necessary even. So why am I even complaining then? Well, because, dear listeners, it's not about any of this at all. It's about wokeness and cancel culture. You know, the real war on science and cancel culture is when you are mildly criticized for using racial slurs in class or asked to respect someone's pronouns. Real oppression and silencing is when you can no longer do blackface on Halloween without being criticized, or when your efforts to revive 18th century race science are not respected. A group of genius brains who dubbed themselves an unparalleled group of prominent scholars got together to write about this stuff at this moment in time. Because there clearly isn't anything more important happening right now. I mean, talk about not reading the room. Holy shit. And you have really got to see this cover and this table of contents with your own eyes to believe it. A big war on science in giant letters and a test tube and everything. Really quite the image for this book about how wokeness is bad. Of course, I don't know the details of the wisdom contained within this collection of essays, since this masterpiece won't be released till July 2025, but judging from the unbelievable table of contents that alleged sexual predator Lawrence Krauss recently shared, I'd bet it has nothing to do with the very real, alarming war on science and speech that is currently unfolding before us. There's a colorful cast of characters participating in this anti-woke collaboration. Gad Saad, Jerry Coyne, Peter Boghossian, Amy Wax, Elizabeth Weiss, Lawrence Krauss, and Jordan Beeferson himself. There's a bunch more too. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but I sure did jot down some notes on the ones I do know a fair bit about. And the fact that Jordan Peterson is in this clown car and it didn't get any of these rational intellectuals to bow out tells you how embarrassing this whole crew is, every last one of them. Imagine being an educated individual and willingly putting your name down alongside this weeping, sniveling, lying, anti-science mess of a man who can't walk 2 steps without screaming at a paper towel dispenser about woke tyranny. Please subscribe via patreon.com/nicemangoes to access the post and help unlock it for others too. If you're into IDW dunking like me, you really don't want to miss it. And there's a whole lot of receipts, links, mentions of Nazis, human skulls even, and O.J. Simpson comes up too. If you don't want to commit to being a patron, even though I think there's far more value that you get out of that, you can individually purchase this post from Patreon now too. So head on over there and support the show. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support it, there are several ways you can do that. You can share it online, talk about what you just heard. You can leave a 5-star review to help others find it too. And you can also subscribe via patreon.com/nicemangoes. No E in mangoes. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter before it's completely wrecked, you'll find me at Nice Mangoes. Again, no E in mangoes.